Awesome. Well, hello and welcome to our webinar today on equipping and empowering our underachieving teenage boys to succeed. We want to thank you for joining us. My name's Errol Lawson. I can see people are coming into the webinar now. My name's Errol Lawson. Our guest today is Nick Mckenzie, who I'll introduce you to in just a few moments' time. So, guys, let's begin, shall we? Have a pen and paper handy. If you are tuned in right now, turn off any distractions you have, any of the screens that you've got, and let's zone into this really important topic, really important subject on how we empower and inspire and equip our underachieving teenage boys to succeed in life, and not just in school academically, but outside of school as well. So, who's this for today then? Who's our ideal listener here today? Maybe you're a parent. Are you a parent? Are you an educator? Do you want to get a deeper understanding about how we can empower teenage boys to succeed against all the odds? If that's you today, you're in the right place. You're in the right room. And so we want to welcome you. We want to thank you for joining us today. A bit of background there, noise there, coming through. I think it's from Nick's line. If you can just mute yourself, please, Nick, just a moment. And we can. Awesome, brilliant. Cool. So what we're going to cover today, right? So today we're going to cover, firstly, the meaning of underachieving. So we're talking about how we help our underachieving boys to succeed. What do we mean by underachieving? We'll unpack that in a moment. What exactly are they underachieving in? We're going to have some conversation, some discussion around that. What are they underachieving in? And then why are our young men underachieving, and what are the causes? We're going to unpack that and get inside that a little bit before we get down to some of the solutions. What are some of the solutions to this? How can we help our young men? What can we do to empower them and equip them to move beyond this space and achieve their full potential? And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A. If there's time at the end, we're scheduled for 1 hour today. With this time at the end, we're going to go into a Q&A time where you can ask questions and directly you'll get some input into a personal situation you're facing right now. Cool. All right, so that's what today's all about. That's our agenda for our webinar today. And before we go straight into our first point of what we mean by underachieving, let us introduce ourselves first of all. My name is Errol Lawson. I'm your host for today's webinar. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a pastor, I'm a leadership coach. I'm part of the John Maxwell coaching, speaking, and training team. I'm also written 3 books so far. My first is called From the Postcode to the Globe, How to Overcome Limitations and Realize Your Potential. And my second is called Teenpreneur, How to Build a Business in Your Teens. People think you can't have a business as a teenager. I defy that. I had my first at 19 years old, and I help kids to do the same right now, all across the country and in different parts of the world. Won various awards as a local hero in Birmingham in 2014, Young Male Entrepreneur of the Year in 2015, and Birmingham Young Professional of the Year finalist in 2016. And my darling wife, Kenny, there with me, who inspires me to do this work with young people. And together we lead Emerge Leadership. We're based here in the UK, also in Ghana. And we're in about 70 schools, roughly, each academic year, doing mentoring, coaching, programs, workshops, motivational talks for young people, especially working with underachieving teenage boys in year 10 and 11 across different schools from different backgrounds around the UK. So that's a bit about me. And you'll get time to ask more questions later if you so choose. My co-host today is my good friend, Nick Mckenzie. Nick works at the Great Men Initiative. Let me give you a bit of Nick's background, because you may not have heard of Nick. Well, Nick is doing some fantastic work over there with the Great Men Initiative. He's a current project manager for the Great Men Project. They're based in London and the surrounding area. Great Men is a project from the gender equality charity, the Great Initiative. They aim to challenge stereotypes of masculinity and to engage men and boys in the movement towards gender equality. Their workshops address gender stereotyping and associated behavior. They question the way that young boys view themselves and view each other and how they interact with girls and women. And he's been a volunteer facilitator with the project for over a year before undertaking the current role he has as a project manager there. All right, so he's doing a lot of stuff there. Nick, give us a bit of your background, please. Tell us about what you do and who you are and some more perspective from you.
Sure, thanks, Errol. So at the moment I'm working as a project manager for the Great Men Project, connecting our volunteers with schools, training them to facilitate the workshops that we do with teenage boys. Previously to that, I've worked in project management for a public health organisation, a professional body called the Faculty of Public Health, working with local councils, national government and universities, doing public health projects, media campaigns, policy work. And prior to that, I've worked in the disability and international development sector for a couple of different organisations, looking at including disabled children in schools across East Africa, as well as working as a support worker for Scope during my time as an undergraduate in Leeds. So I'm really excited to have a chance to kind of chat with you today and discuss how our work, which is workshop led with volunteers directly with loads of big groups of boys in schools, connects with your mentoring work and how we're looking at similar problems, but potentially different solutions to that.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you in it today, man. And I know that we're both here because we're passionate about seeing young people thrive and succeed and be the best that they can be. So without further ado, and welcome again if you're listening, wherever you are in the world today, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We'd love to get your input a bit later on in our Q&A section as we go through our agenda. Okay, so first of all, Nick, what do we mean by underachieving? What do we mean by underachieving? I mean, we hear the term underachieving boys so often. What exactly, in your point, what's your perspective on that? What do we mean by it?
Well, I think for us, quite often people will say underachieving just means academic, in terms of achieving lower grades in schools, which then means boys are or certain groups of boys are less likely to get into university, to go on to have the careers that they want to. I think for us as well, when we're working with boys in schools, it's also underachieving in wider areas in their life. So we know that statistically compared to girls, boys are more likely to be violent towards others, become addicted to alcohol, drugs, have criminal offences and then potentially be imprisoned. And a big one for us at the moment is not seeking help for mental health problems. One of the issues that we quite often discuss with boys is how suicide is the biggest cause of death among men under 30 or 45 now. And that is something that we need to tackle really early on.
It's great. I completely agree. And I think a big part of it as well is that, boys generally are not realizing their full potential. And there was a time when boys were actually doing better than girls academically even. And, changes were made. And, it's completely flipped on its head now. I'm a governor in 2 schools, a primary and a secondary, and a chair in another school. And I see the stats, I see the results. And there's such a huge gap between our boys and girls academically. I know it's not just about that. But, of course, this plays out into wider life. And there's a perception, unfortunately, among a lot of boys that, what's the point in trying? What's the point in, what potential do I have? What's the point of me even believing in myself? Why should I even strive to be good or to achieve excellence in any particular field, And we need to really confront that. So it's a broad thing. So it's not just about academics, as you said. It's about understanding mental health challenges. It's about relationships. What exactly do you think they're underachieving in? Like, what are they underachieving in?
Well, I think it is those, if you look at the statistics, it is achieving those lower grades, it's having poor relationships with themselves and with other people. And as they grow older, then that being like sexual or emotional relationships, and especially conforming to existing stereotypes of what they feel they should be as men, as young boys and as young men, and how that leads to their treatment of women, of other men of varied sexualities, or who are different to them and might not conform to the usual expected stereotypes of what they should be as men. And then that really leading down kind of to underachieving in so many other areas, whether that's underachieving in a sense of themselves and who they should be and what they want to do in life, or leading down that road of not having the career that they would like to have or should be capable of doing, or down that route of becoming addicted to something, or then becoming a criminal, being imprisoned, being violent. It's all of these things together, and really for us, we see that as something which is coming from these stereotypes, this box that they have to fit in.
What kind of stereotypes?
So really just the existing stereotypes of masculinity. I don't know if this sense that to be a man or to be a successful young man, you have to be dominant, you have to be in control of your emotions but not talk about them, which is a weird dichotomy and thing to expect anyone to do. To be sexually aggressive and in a way which is always just straight, and also for boys from different cultural backgrounds, it's very existing stereotypes are very framed in terms of being a successful, rich white man. Like we're in the era of Donald Trump being president now, and he's the epitome of that man box of traditional stereotypes, which we know are so damaging to boys and lead to all of these reasons why they're underachieving at the moment.
So important. And I think one of the other areas that they're underachieving in is actually because of these stereotypes. It's the point at which they discover their own independence. A lot of the boys that I'm working with, to engage in a conversation about goals or dreams or aspirations, or even to engage in any kind of reflection, is a massive challenge. And rather than reflect on who they are and what matters to them and what their goals are, they're actually more inclined to behave, to avoidance behavior. So that can be playing up, that can be causing trouble, that can be just anything to take the spotlight off themselves. And in a way, for me, that is underachieving, because the sooner they can realize that they have the power to make choices that affect their lives and their futures, and I think girls find that earlier. They find that earlier, and it's a massive deal. And the whole thing around stereotypes is huge. It's huge. Boys are, sadly, they're really struggling with it. They're really struggling with it. And I speak to parents. We had a parent workshop just last week, and unfortunately, in this particular school, most of the parents were single moms. And they're literally pulling out their hair thinking, how do I just connect with my son? How do I get him to just relate to me in a healthy way and just help me even around the house and have a healthy relationship, And there's this sense of just them wandering around in life, trying to figure out who they are, what life's about, with no compass, no direction. And for me, that is underachieving as well. That's a big part of it.
Exactly. And just to pick up on some of what you've said, that in terms of that avoidance behaviour, it can be quite a dangerous cycle, because that avoidance behaviour can become this aggressive acting up, which then conforms to this idea of boys will be boys, he's a troublemaker. Exactly. And then the same boys end up being excluded from lessons. But what we find and what we see in our workshops, because they're participant-led, they use games and activities and create a space for the boys to actually talk about some of these issues and speak up about their opinions and how they feel, is that when our volunteers walk into a classroom, to start with, they might see a few of the boys and the teachers will warn them of the troublemakers. But actually, once we start engaging and doing the workshops, they tend to be the boys that will provide the most honest and thought-provoking responses, because this is the first time that they've been given an opportunity to actually express themselves in a way where they're not going to be punished for it. And I think a big part of that is creating that space for teachers and for parents to feel comfortable to talk to the boys in a way and in a language which they understand, rather than kind of putting them down all the time or removing them from the classroom.
And part of the challenge is that teachers generally don't have the time. They have the heart a lot of the time, not always. They have the heart to see these boys succeed and achieve beyond whatever external pressures they may be facing. But they don't have the time to involve themselves pastorally to the level that they need to really to really help these boys turn the corner. And like you said, they end up being excluded. They end up being sent to different units or centres for different interventions, and they fall off. It's really difficult. This is a big deal. If you're a parent listening right now, if you're a single mom even, or a teacher listening right now, then I'm sure you're fully aware of the nature of the challenge. It's not a personal one to you per se, but across the country, really, we're seeing the same thing. Black boys, white boys, across boundaries. Young boys they're having these challenges, and everyone wants to know, how do we solve it and how do we overcome it? And let's look at some of the causes and what is it. And I mentioned there that the education system. I don't think the education system is to blame per se. I think it's got a part to play. One school I was in just a couple of weeks back, a teacher said to me, Errol, we looked at all of our exclusions in the last little while and the last 12 months, and we noticed that all of the boys, they're all boys, and they've all got single moms. So your background noise coming through there, Nick. They're all single moms. What do we do? She said to me. And, this is just a reality right now. And we can debate whether, we need to do parental education and what have you. And, even before parents have babies and things of that nature. But a lot of these young boys that are having these challenges are from single parent background. And it's so difficult for a lady, a woman, to raise a man. It's not impossible, but it's near impossible, because they get to an age, unfortunately, they get to an age where they begin to lose respect for their moms. And that lack of respect that shows up in education. And when they go into the classroom and that teacher, who happens to be a female, is also trying to communicate with them, they disrespect the teacher. And it has this ripple effect. There's no boundaries now. There's no boundaries at home. There's no boundaries at school. And they're kind of becoming a law unto themselves. They get to year 11 and it's almost hopeless for them, almost. It can be that difficult at times because there's no boundaries whatsoever, because there are no boundaries at home. And so one of the big causes that we see in our boys overachieving is just this lack of a positive male role model in their home environment. And this is not new news. I think we understand this. This is one of the challenges. What are the challenges do you see as well, Nick, in your work? What are the causes?
Yeah, I think you've touched on quite a lot of them. And I think one of the things that we find, which leads from all of those different scenarios that you said, is that these are issues that apply to all boys at the moment in the UK in secondary schools. We work in any kind of school, and I've done workshops and helped facilitate workshops in private schools, in grammar schools, in comprehensive, in new big shiny corporate academies, but the issues are the same. These traits, this lack of role models make a huge difference, and are definitely some of the key causes. And I think for us, what we see as well is a lack of consistent messaging. It's not just that who are these role models, but boys now are being bombarded with different messages, whether from their parents, whether from their friends, whether from teachers, whether it's even from us coming in and doing these workshops, or people such as yourselves who are doing intervention work, but also from the internet and social media. More and more boys are engaged at an early time with online communities, which can be talking at a level and influencing them in a way which they're not really mature enough to be aware of. And also what we find more and more is younger boys, being exposed to pornography and explicit aggressive material, and not not being equipped. Boys as young as 12 looking at very graphic pornography, but not being equipped or having the understanding to really know what it is. And all of these things combined together are definitely causing this crisis, as it were, of identity amongst boys. And then what we're seeing in terms of the effects of that is this underachieving in so many areas of their life.
I mean, so powerful. You know, I want to touch on a couple of those areas because I haven't said earlier, but my background, my parents divorced when I was 11 years old, and I kind of went completely off the rails. When at age 13, we got into prison for the first time, and he spent most of my teenage years in jail. I got involved with drugs, I got involved in gangs, and all those. My life was completely off the rails until around age 19, 20, when my life began to turn around, and I've kind of been there. One of the key things is this thing about peer relationships. And I go into school and I always tell kids, you know, that my dad would say to me, son, if you mingle with dogs, son, you'll catch fleas, you know. And the reality is that we as parents, as educators, as practitioners, we've really got to educate people on the power and the importance of surrounding ourselves with healthy relationships, people that inspire, encourage, uplift, nurture us, you know. And I think what we see sometimes in young people is this kind of sabotaging behavior where, because they have no positivity in their home life, or they're not used to being regarded positively, somebody like me will come into a workshop with them, and they'll really appreciate it. They'll feedback really amazing things about how great it was for them and how great it's been. But while in the workshop, they'll play up, they'll sabotage the workshop or sabotage their experience, really, because as far as they're concerned internally, you know what, I'm not used to having anything good in my life. I'm not used to having a good experience or being treated respectfully. And so let me just destroy this as well. Let me just bring this down as well. And so sometimes we see this self-sabotaging behavior. And we've somehow got to be able to, I know this is hard. I know this is really difficult. We've somehow got to expose, I think, our young men to experiences and opportunities that they can engage themselves in positively, that will challenge their belief system, their mindset, their negative limiting beliefs that they have, their negative conditioning that they have, and expose them to different things. Because you mentioned the stereotypes there. I had a parent say to me recently, I'd love to take my son to the football, but he's not into football, so I just don't know how to engage with him. Stereotypes again. Not all men like sports, not all men like football. And so the question is, you know, can we actually figure out what it is that our sons are really passionately interested in, whether it's gaming or whatever, and make the space and time to engage ourselves in what they're interested in, and at a sacrifice to ourselves, what we think is the right thing for them to be doing. Because I think we do impose these labels and these stereotypes on our men, on our boys. You know, it's not helping them, man. It's not helping them. So I completely agree. So peer relationships, social media, porn, video games, movies, even all these things are creating these perpetuating these limiting and negative stereotypes. I think there's something else though. I said before that, you know, obviously men were achieving academically at a point many years ago. It was the other way around. Girls now are dominating academically. There's something to be said about our education system as well. The options that we're giving. Back in the day, boys did better because the subjects were more vocational, more physical, more hands-on, perhaps less coursework. Now that curriculum has changed, we're seeing the results change. We've got to ask, is the curriculum weighted in the favor of our boys? Is it fair to our boys that do we need to have things that are going to give them a better chance of succeeding academically as well?
Yeah, exactly. And I think from what you've just said, one of the most important things is that peer support and that peer space, because for any listeners so far, you might think that we're painting a completely bleak picture for the boys, but it's not. They're not completely like that. The boys, it isn't a case of boys are all bad, and we never go in demonizing them. And what I think people like Errol or myself find is when you do create that space of positive peer support, the relief and the confidence that boys gain from seeing their peers and classmates accept them for not liking football, or everyone saying they're comfortable with talking about their emotions, is really powerful. You can see a real visible weight lifted off the boys' shoulders when we do an exercise around, is it okay for boys and men to cry? And all of the boys in the room, whether it's the really super confident ones or the quieter ones who might be avoiding engaging or probably are being bullied by the others, when they all see each other supporting each other, it just changes that dynamic completely. And it really is a case of the environment at the moment which is causing this, as opposed to the boys being innately bad or looking for trouble and needing to be shaped in a certain way. And I think you're right, we do need to look at the curriculum, and it's really tough because at the same time, more than ever, we need to make sure that girls are engaging with subjects which they were previously told they couldn't. So, you know, all of the STEM subjects, getting girls into engineering and the subjects that they want to do and they're good at. But likewise, perhaps maybe it's less of the curriculum content, but almost styles of teaching which engage with boys a bit more and allow them to take their own path, as it were, rather than fitting them all into one box.
Brilliant. So here you asking in the background there, so what are the solutions? Wow. Let's share our thoughts first, then we'll come to you guys who are listening and maybe get your input as well. So what are some of the solutions? What are some of the solutions? You want to go first, Nick?
Yeah, sure. I mean, some of the solutions are things that we've talked about. It is creating that environment for boys to, from our point of view in the Great Men Projects, be themselves, define their own masculinity, define what it means to be a man and a young man and a person for themselves, and creating space for them to do that. And as parents and teachers, then that would be challenging your own views on that. And it might be going against the grain of what you were taught by your teachers or your parents or grandparents. But I think creating that space is the first step. And then at the moment, because that space doesn't exist, the interventions such as ours, going into schools and doing the workshops that we do in the Great Men Project, as well as training our volunteers who are men themselves, who then pass on that perspective in their day-to-day lives, are really powerful ways to get it started. And I think for us, it's then, okay, we're a small organisation. Your organisation still has a limited reach. It's how do we then take that to the next level? This is something which affects all boys and all men now, and will continue to do so as more boys become teenagers and grow up into men. So it's something that needs to then be, the next level is taking it UK wide and making sure it's part of their education. And I think the big question then is, where does that education come from? Is it the responsibility of teachers? Is it the responsibility of parents? I mean, that's a big question now for any kind of education topic, especially in terms of non-academic skills and knowledge. But yeah, I think that would be a good start. What do you think?
I agree, and you nailed it. I think creating a space for conversation, non-judgmental conversation. I think a big part of the solution is us actually creating that space with our boys, with our sons, whether that's going on a long car drive with our sons, or whether it's in school, creating non-judgmental spaces where they can just be and talk and express themselves in a coaching format. So it's a big part of what we do. We have a program called the Equipped to Succeed mentoring program, and basically, it's all about helping them to figure out who they are. So we talk about goal setting. We talk about how to identify where it is we're going in life. Who are we? What's our purpose? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Having these conversations with boys is literally like you'd think that you'd invented something brand new. But when you create that space for them to express what's in their hearts, what's on their mind, and they hear other boys talking and feeling and expressing the same kind of things, it just empowers them. So for me, that's really important, creating that space for conversation, dialogue. Boys don't talk, girls talk a lot, and it serves them well. We've got to create space for our boys to be able to speak without judgment and talk about what masculinity is, talk about what it means to be a man, like you said. I think also we've got to create some support for our single moms. Single moms have it really tough, man, really, really hard, and they're getting beaten up, worn down, sometimes physically and verbally abused, and it's really hard for them. We've got to find a way to provide support for them somehow. I'm not sure how we do that, whether it's through school or through support groups, but we need to do that. I think, we talk about role models a lot. We need role models for our men. Our men need spaces to just engage with other men in healthy relationships, to share concerns, ideas, hear wisdom, get advice and get guidance. They need that space, they need that space.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, so our workshops are run by volunteer facilitators. Yeah. We'll have 2 volunteers who look after a group of about 15 boys for 3 hours and go through the workshops. Before our facilitators are allowed to go to schools, we take them on a 2-day training course. Yeah. The first day of that is going through essentially the activities of the workshop, exploring their own masculinity, the ideas around feminism and gender equality, and where they've maybe encountered some of these issues of underachieving in their own lives. And what we get from pretty much every volunteer, whether they're 18 and have just left school themselves, or 45, 50 and have had a lifetime of experiences, is people saying to us, wow, why is this the first time that I've talked about these things with other men? Why don't I talk about this with my friends? Why don't I talk about it with my sons and my daughters, or my father, my grandfather? So it's a powerful idea. That's where the kind of the ingrained stereotypes really take effect, when you have generations of men who don't even realize that they're conforming to them when they're trying to be good men and trying to do the right thing. So you're exactly right. It's creating that space and creating those role models and that support. And what happens when you create men who have that healthy relationship with their own identity and their own masculinity is men who can then support women.
Yes.
Who, if you have men who are, even in very specific terms, if you have good mental health, if you're in and you have a support network of your other friends and men around you, then you're less likely to have aggressive and violent relationships, which, if we're looking at this from a perspective as how we can support women, how we can reduce domestic violence, how we can reduce sexual assault and rape cases, which the majority of perpetrators are men, then that comes from the root causes of that are from men having unhealthy identities with themselves. So I think you're right. It's by creating this environment, we support boys to achieve a lot more, but then we do support those single mums, and we support every woman in the street and in these boys' lives by equipping boys to have better relationships with them.
Yeah. So we've got a few minutes remaining, and I want to get some perspectives. I know we've got a couple of people listening here with us today. Are there any questions at all? before we do that, in fact, if you want to contact us out of here today, if you want to drop us a line, if you've got further questions or you want a private conversation, please feel free to get in touch. There's our number there. There's our email. If you're wherever you are in the country, to be honest with you, either myself or Nick will be happy to link with you and just to support you any way that we can, really. Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
Sure. I mean, I'll just say the easiest way to get in touch with us at the Great Men Project is we have our website, which is greatmen.org. We have a Facebook page and we're on Twitter. We're available to come and do workshops in any school which is roughly in and around London. I think the furthest afield we've gone so far is the deep north of Leicester, but we're happy to have a chat with you about any of these issues. And we're also looking for more volunteers. So if you know any men out there who really want to engage with this work but don't really know how, or are struggling to find a way that they can support boys and women in their life, then put them in touch with us as well, and we can have a chat to see whether they might be suitable to be a volunteer.
Awesome. And and likewise, if you're a teacher and you're thinking about some mentoring interventions for your students in your school, boys or girls, we have female and male mentors, and that can come into school and work with your students and really help them to realize who they are and to realize their full academic potential as well. Cool. All right. So over to you guys now. Are there any questions? Has anyone got a question for us?
I can ask a question if we've got one.
Yeah.
I just, from your experience and from all the boys you've worked with, are there any examples that really stand out where you've seen your intervention, the work you've done with them, change someone's life? Like, are there any that spring to mind, some examples of, these boys or this boy really needed this, and now 2 years down the line I can see that his life has completely changed because of what we did?
Yeah, I mean, I've had situations where, I've been walking down the street and someone's come up to me and said, "Hey, Errol, you came to my school. You told me how to set goals, and I set my goals to go to uni, and guess what? I'm in uni, man. I did it, and I can't remember who the kid is, but he remembers me. I've had that happen a few times, and cases where boys just start applying themselves. And there are so many cases, right? I think the reality in our line of work is that when you're dealing with boys who are really, really disadvantaged or really challenged, we don't always see the change immediately, and it can take years sometimes for the change to really begin to bed in. So typically speaking, when boys are finished working with us, we hear parents will say, yes, he's more respectful, he's listening more, he's more engaged at home. Teachers will say yes, the same things. But oftentimes you get called to come straight back in like 8 or 10 weeks later because they pull that resource out of the boy's life and then they're dropping off again, because they need consistency. Our boys need consistency. So we look at ourselves as farmers. We're sowing seeds in the lives of these young men. And it's literally, it is so important that their provision that's in their lives is consistent. This is why they need dads, right? Healthy dads, ideally. So I'd love to say, yeah, there are these amazing stories of this boy. Now he was in the gutter and now he's a prime minister. But actually, I've seen more small steps being taken, more better choices, better decision-making processes, more thoughtfulness, more consideration, and changing friendship circles, things like that, I had a young man recently who it was an absolute, I won't say a nightmare, there's no nightmares, but it was a real challenge to work with. And I was surprised when his mom contacted me and said, he loves you so much, you've made such a difference in his life, like he just doesn't stop talking about you, We should never underestimate the difference that we're making in someone's life. When they're in darkness, we may be the only ray of light and of hope in their world. As bad as it might seem that they are, we may be the only ray of light for them. And so you know, that's always inspired me to know that as tough as they seem, as bad as it might seem that they're behaving, even in our workshops sometimes, we may be the only ray of light that they have.
Exactly. And I think our experience echoes that. We go in and do workshops, so it's a lot more short term. We don't see the boys over a long period of time, but what we do see from the feedback we get from the boys and when we speak to them is just how positive they are about having these opportunities and having someone there who provides a different kind of role model for them, who provides a positive influence for around talking about the issues that they're worried about. And just having that, being able to be worried, being able to talk about things, it, as you say, makes those small steps. And I think the thing that I really like and want to emphasize is that importance of the small steps. It's the everyday nature of this. You know, we're not going out trying to find a cure for cancer or some scientific breakthrough. This is just things that needs to be changed on that really small day-to-day level. We need to just create that support there and create that freedom for boys to not conform to existing stereotypes. And essentially that's it. That just needs to be done on a day-to-day basis with every boy, which is huge in terms of scale, but in terms of complexity, it's not rocket science, and it's something that we can all do as adults and as role models for young teenage boys at the moment.
So true, so true. Are there any other questions? Anybody else? I think. Oh, you got any more questions, Nick?
I don't at the moment. I think we've covered all of my questions.
Cool, man. Cool. Well, guys, listen, I hope that's been helpful for you. I know it's certainly been insightful, and for me as we've just chatted and reflected upon just our practices, really working with young men day in, day out. We've talked about so far what it means, what underachieving means, and understanding that, and also looking at you know, what the areas in which they are underachieving. So we talked about in family, in school, in relationships. We talked about crime, we talked about mental health, and we also talked about, you know, what are some of the causes of underachieving. Cool. Well, if there are no more questions, we'll wrap up there, and we'll leave it there. Cool.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I think, I'll just echo what you were saying. It's really good opportunity. There are very few people out there doing this kind of focused work and actually working with boys in a way which doesn't demonize them.